And Ring in the New in the company of Clive James and Alexandra Kazan.
Paris, on the eve of 1992, and as the whole world waits for a momentous new year to begin, we've come here to the heart of the new Europe to present our review of 1991. Joining us in Paris for this special night are some very special people, all very happy to be here and deeply conscious of the importance and significance of the occasion.
I am very happy to be here and deeply conscious of the importance and significance of the occasion.
So it's on now, on through the glittering streets of this glittering capital. Here, deep in the pulsating Parisian nightlife that symbolizes the approaching dawn of European unity. We welcome you, we welcome the whole world. Where else than to that internationally famous night spot, the Golden Ecu.
Welcome to the biggest night of the year. Welcome to Paris, the city they call the capital of France. And welcome to the new European year of 1992, the year in which Britain joins the new Europe wholeheartedly, with everyone marching forward together over the dead body of Mrs. Thatcher. But first, we are here to say goodbye to 1991, a year that began in uncertainty. Saddam Hussein had turned the old ruler out of Kuwait. John Major had turned the old ruler out of Downing Street. Would either of them still be there when the year ended? And if the United States and the Soviet Union both went broke, which of them would the Japanese turn into Disneyland? Tonight, I will try to answer these questions. But first, let's meet my assistant for the evening, a girl born and raised in France who has not had the benefit of the British educational system and can therefore both speak and read the English language. Ladies and gentlemen, Mademoiselle Alexandra Kazan. Alexandra, it's wonderful to have you here.
Je suis très heureuse d'être avec vous ce soir.
Alexandra, I'm enchanted. Or may I say, enchanté?
You may, if you pronounce it properly.
Alexandra, I'm only trying to sound European.
But Clive, you are already so European. Your hairstyle is just like our President François Mitterrand. You have the waistline of Chancellor Kohl, and I think you bought your aftershave in Turkey?
Alexandra will be with me several times during the evening when we present our awards for outstanding achievement in 1991.
Yes, Clive. And finally, we will present our awards of the year for the Man of the Year and the Woman of the Year. But for now, I will leave you alone to begin the story of 1991.
What was that?
Just a piece of spaghetti.
Thank you, Alexandra Kazan. As 1991 began, President Saddam Hussein put Iraq firmly on the map. The piece of the map he put Iraq firmly on was called Kuwait. Now he controlled the world's supply of a vital product, dates. Threatened by a destiny without dates, the West faced a date with destiny. Saddam celebrated his triumph by stirring a ceremonial pot of Saddam Hussein lean cuisine camel hoof casserole with dates, croutons, dates, parsley, dates, olives, dates, and dates. The president tasted it personally and said it could do with a few more dates. The Western powers moved swiftly to pool their resources to stave off the political paralysis threatened by Saddam's date monopoly. The British Prime Minister rang the President of the United States to offer advice. The President said, "Thank you very much, Margaret." The decision was taken to send in the West's top troubleshooter, the American military commander with the strategic brain of Julius Caesar, the aesthetic sensibilities of a hummingbird, and the destructive potential of a bull in the British Museum, General Norman Schwarzkopf. Assigned to liberate the great Kuwait date mandate, Schwarzkopf abandoned his flower arranging class in Tuscaloosa and flew straight to Saudi Arabia, which had been democratic since the previous Saturday. Schwarzkopf was a man alone, accompanied by a large entourage. The man in dark glasses at his side was the General's personal hairstylist and manicurist, Mr. Joey the Shark Mancucci. Like Schwarzkopf, an accomplished amateur symbolist poet with an interest in high explosives. In Moscow, President Gorbachev was busy with the task of converting the Soviet Union into a free market economy with sponsorship. He gave a speech sponsored by the People's Potato Ice Cream Cooperative under its new name, Spadulik. In the speech, he voiced approval of General Norman Schwarzkopf's intervention in the Gulf with reservations.
Делегация, о чем речь идет? Президент бросил, Верховный Совет бросил. Местные власти, значит, нас сводят, не сводят до этого. И тогда что нам, говорит, остается браться самим решать задачи?
Back in Britain, ordinary people prepared for the coming conflict. Many rushed to donate their blood. Amongst them was the Duchess of York. Her blood was found to be of a new type, rhesus negative, Yorkie bar positive. The leader of the opposition also gave some blood.
Kinnock, K-W-N-O-C-K.
Once it was established who he was, Mr. Kinnock received star treatment.
Your name, please.
Yes, Kinnock, K-W-N-O-C-K.
Owing to a mix-up at the hospital, a patient was given blood from both the Duchess of York and the leader of the opposition. The patient was last seen talking endlessly in Welsh while throwing cream cakes at a policeman. Prime Minister John Major left for the Middle East. He reassured the exiled Kuwaiti princes that the West was ready to fight to the death to protect their democratic right to drive their Rolls Royces at full speed between nightclubs on roads paved with beggars. Mr. Major impressed everyone with his dynamic fighting talk.
It is extremely agreeable, and yes, I will have another.
Sport, and one footballer's name was on everyone's lips, which brings us to our first quiz question of the year. Got your pencils ready? Here it comes. One of these people can kick an opponent's kneecap off in a fit of anger, and the other is a footballer. Which is which? Not all the news in January centred on the Gulf crisis. In London, the new Chancellor of the Exchequer, Mr. Norman Lamont, was tackling his first big problem. He couldn't get in. Mr. Michael Heseltine, to whom Mr. Major had given the vital job of devising another way of saying poll tax, was also finding life difficult. Leaving number 10, he discovered that his car was missing. Only that morning he'd found his desk in the corridor. It was all very odd. He'd have to talk to John about it when his telephone was working again. For Welsh singing star Tom Jones, a career-enhancing year began when he revealed himself to have new dimensions of philosophical detachment, sense of purpose, and steadfastness under pressure.
You're sleeping as I'm standing at the door.
At a key engagement in war-torn Beirut, a stray phosphorus shell set fire to his already overheated trousers. But he carried on singing, and people began to suspect that here was a man who had the strength of character to bridge the gap between nations, even if he couldn't sit down for a week. February, and it was war. War in the Middle East. Some said it was a war to save despotism from tyranny. Some said it was partly a holy war. Some said it was wholly a holy war. The world's press asked President Bush if he thought the Allies would win.
We will prevail.
Yes, but would they win?
We will prevail.
To put it another way, would they do the opposite of lose?
We will prevail.
Sometimes a man just can't prevail. In America, at times of national emergency, there is only one place for the Vice President of the United States. Mr. and Mrs. Quayle left for Patagonia. In Moscow, President Gorbachev wrote to President Bush outlining a Soviet plan for the Middle East. He suggested that the United States should give the Soviet Union a $1,000 billion loan secured against the Pravda pension fund, which had been organized by his friend, Mr. Robert Maxwell. President Bush immediately took the Gorbachev plan to the Oval Office and gave it careful consideration. The commander of Britain's contingent in the Gulf was General de la Billière. The commander of France's contingent in the Gulf was Captain Cyril Fotherington Smythe Cheltenham. The commander of Germany's contingent in the Gulf was on holiday in Tenerife. Sparing no expense, the British Army trained its personnel in high-technology desert warfare. How to bounce aggressively towards the enemy in a sack. How to run out of petrol in a country full of oil. The climax of Britain's effort came when it sent in its entire tank force. But the crew stopped at every pub on the way. The British tank was equipped with a safe sex device. It worked. The Allied war effort was so overwhelming that the Iraqi army instantly gave up the idea of oppressing Kuwait and went back to its peacetime task of oppressing Iraq. Yes, Saddam Hussein threw in the towel. To the victorious Western powers, Saddam Hussein extended the hand of friendship, which had previously belonged to his Minister for War. In Kuwait, there were shouts of joy. The Kuwaiti ruling family returned to establish friendly contact with their adoring people. The fighting in the Gulf over, Prime Minister John Major predicted a new future for Britain under the Conservative Party.
Council house repairs that are shoddy and slow. Hospital appointments that take all day. Trains that run late and buses that travel in packs.
But skeptics said that things would have to get a lot better before they got that good. The big film of the moment, earning 7 Oscars, including 2 for its director and star, Kevin Costner, was Dances with Wolves. Kevin Costner did all his own stunts, but then so did the buffalo. For For Britain, the way ahead was in Europe, where President Mitterrand was extending warm words of welcome.
C'est marrant, j'ai une dépêche, mais vous devez l'avoir aussi. Vous avez tout avant moi, généralement. Hein? C'est par vous que je sais les choses.
Britain's Foreign Secretary Douglas Hurd continued his efforts to integrate himself into the European structure by unobtrusively demonstrating his mastery of the French language.
Clearly, the troops, I'm talking now about the British troops, but the same is clearly true of the American and French troops, will go home.
With the war over in the Gulf, the leader of one of the world's military powers was shaking on his pedestal. His name was Mikhail Gorbachev, and he was in trouble. Gorbachev had a new boy called Boris Yeltsin breathing down his neck. Toyota had withdrawn its sponsorship for his wife Raisa's line in exotic underwear, and now he was up all night sewing the potato sacks himself. In the words of the hit song of the month, performed with raw enthusiasm by The Clash, should he stay or should he go?
Darling, you got to let me know. Should I stay or should I go? If you say that you are mine, I'll be here till the end of time. So you got to let me know. Should I stay or should I go? It's always tease, tease, tease.
Perestroika, perestroika.
You're happy when I'm on my knees. One day is fine and next is black. So if you want me off your back, well, come on and let me know. Should I stay or should I go? Should I stay or should I go now? Should I stay or should I go now?
And now, for all of us here at the Golden Echo, and for all of you watching all over the world, it's time for our first award. And here to tell us all about it is that epitome of Parisian elegance, Mademoiselle Alexandra Kazan. And which award is this, Alexandra?
Clive, this is the BBC Gardener's World Award, which goes to the person who has done most to transform the appearance of our planet in 1991.
Thank you, Alexandra. That's a beautiful thought.
Yes, and that is a replica of the beautiful floral creation awarded to the winner.
Thank you, Alexandra. Alexandra, what do we do now?
Clive, I will now announce the finalists for the award.
Thank you, Alexandra.
There is only one nomination for this award because no one has done more to change the world than he has.
Alexandra, open the envelope.
The winner of the BBC Gardener's World Award for 1991, the man who turned hundreds of square miles of desert into thousands of square miles of desert is... Saddam Hussein.
Saddam is unable to be with us tonight because he's supervising the firing squad for a cabinet reshuffle. But he's just been given the award in his headquarters 2 miles under Baghdad, and he's ready to talk to us now by satellite.
منذ أن توقف العدوان عملنا ليل نهار لكي نزيل ما بإمكاننا أن نزيله من آثار العدوان برغم استمرار الحصار على بلادنا.
More awards later, but for now, thank you, Alexandra Kazan. March, and stressed-out British Labour Party leader Neil Kinnock engaged the services of Japanese foot massage expert Miss Keiko Shatsu. Miss Shatsu travelled everywhere with the party leader, crouched at his feet. While Mr. Kinnock did business on his car phone, he couldn't help expressing aloud his physical satisfaction.
Oh, wonderful. Oh, that's wonderful.
Mr. Major went to Madame Tussauds to meet his waxwork. Which brings us to another quiz question. Neither of these two men says anything of any significance, but only one of them was previously Max Bygraves. Which one? For Mr. Major, it was off to Germany for the annual Munich Joke-Telling Festival, der Allerjährige Gewitzsagende Ho-Ho-Ho Fest. While Mr. Major worked on his own joke, Chancellor Kohl told the traditional German joke about the French girl with the baguette, the Bavarian girl with the sausage, the 6 Italian girls with the salami, and Rod Stewart. The joke lost nothing in translation. Mr. Michael Heseltine had finally managed to make contact with the Prime Minister to complain about his missing desk, chair, telephone, and, most important of all, his missing car. Mr. Major told him that from now on, Mr. Heseltine's car would always be waiting. But Mr. Major didn't say that the car would be waiting in a national car park in Sheffield. In Moscow, there was a powerful challenge to Mr. Gorbachev's leadership. Boris Yeltsin was emerging as a strong contender. But in the final count, Mr. Gorbachev survived by 3 votes. There was a touching moment of sympathy between political rivals when Mrs. Thatcher was told that Mr. Heseltine had been seen crawling on his hands and knees around Westminster, begging for a lift home.
Excellent.
The Middle East was back to normal, with all the usual absolute rulers safely restored to their palaces. It was time for General Stormen Norman Schwarzkopf to go back to America and his Chippendale cabinet full of porcelain figurines and hand-painted anti-personnel mines. Before he left the Gulf, the general collected a bit of sand to take home.
This is sand from the liberated beaches of Kuwait, is what this is. And we're very proud to be able to do that. Thank you very much indeed.
He took the sand home and put it in his back garden so that any time he felt like it, he could just run outside and liberate it again. For General Stormen Norman Schwarzkopf, this was a month of transition from soldier to superstar. The big song of the month was a tribute to his charisma. It was sung by someone called Chesney Hawkes and called The One and Only. April began with a solemn warning from Prince Charles. He said the education standards of the country were so low that 80% of school leavers couldn't read or write, and the other 30% couldn't add up. Charles had put his finger on it. Too many young people had minimal educational qualifications and were being forced into dead-end jobs, such as Prime Minister. Mr. Major himself was vague about his personal tally of O-levels.
I can't remember. But I keep reading in the press that I had 2, and I can certainly tell you that isn't true. Considerably more than that.
It was considerably more than 2. It was 3. Cake decoration, archery, and intermediate finger painting. But John Major wasn't the only political leader whose educational qualifications were in doubt. In a searching test, Liberal Democrat leader Paddy Ashdown was asked What would you do if you were the leader of a minority party with a shrinking membership and a name that not even you could remember without stopping to think?
I don't know.
Another victim of the British educational system was Prince Andrew, who this month resat his finals in current affairs. The question was, if your brother talks to trees and your father drives carriages at press photographers, who is your mother?
My mother is the Queen.
The Soviet Union was desperately short of money, so President Gorbachev went to Japan, which had money to burn, and offered to take some of it away with him. There was a cultural misunderstanding when Mr. Gorbachev almost forgot to link fingers, a traditional gesture which in Russia means our hearts are as one forever, and in Japan means one day everything you've got will be mine. In Britain, it was time to enthrone the new Archbishop of Canterbury, Dr. Carey. Mr. Major, Mr. Kinnock and Mr. Ashdown were present, and they were joined by screaming Lord Such in a startling new costume. The climax of the ceremony came with the solemn moment when the new Archbishop was hypnotized and told that when he woke up, he'd be a charismatic orator whose every speech would electrify the nation. Dr. Carey had not been the only candidate for the post of Archbishop of Canterbury. Also up for the job was the Reverend Al Sharpton from the United States, a man whose spiritual refinement was matched only by his precise eloquence.
Well, I think that if there was no other way to be free and no other way to achieve the things that are humanly your right to have, then there may be a way or a rationale.
The Reverend Al's failure deeply disappointed his retinue of altar boys and theological students. London Zoo hit a financial crisis. The news that the zoo would close was greeted with sadness by numerous show business celebrities. They included Mr. Oliver Reed. In Iraq, Saddam Hussein needed the land of the Kurds for date production. The Kurds were on the move, but had nowhere to move to. Prime Minister John Major of Great Britain had a plan. He called his plan the Safe Haven. This was a breakthrough because no one had ever heard of an unsafe haven. Mr. Major wrote his Safe Haven plan down and sent it to Mr. Bush. Mr. Bush gave it careful consideration. Meanwhile, trained lip readers reported that Mr. Michael Heseltine was still grappling with the challenge of finding something else to call the poll tax. I could call it the pool tax, he said to himself, and tax anyone with a swimming pool. Or the Paul tax, and tax anyone called Paul. Or the pill tax, and tax anyone who takes pills. Or the pail tax, if they take too many pills. Or what about the pile tax, for people who sit on rubber rings? I've got lots of ideas. I can see why John gave me this job. I wonder where my bloody car is. Song of the Month was a blast from the past towards a hopeful new future in which even the most red-blooded man would not be afraid to express the feminine side of his nature. It was sung by Cher, a woman with everything a man wants, rearranged to make it easier for him to get at. May, and in the Soviet Union, Mr. Gorbachev's position was further undermined when he was seen with a woman not his wife. She proved to be Miss Ludmila Hivitova, formerly Miss KGB 1956. The Lithuanian Jeux Sans Frontières, Miss Hivitova won the gold medal for piano throwing. Nothing could stop the surging popularity of Boris Yeltsin as he spearheaded the drive to upgrade Soviet fast foods. Yeltsin personally tested the new Soviet fat-free Spam. Soviet fat-free Spam consists of preservatives, additives, preventatives, derivatives, adhesives, and little unexplained crunchy bits. Mr. Yeltsin then moved on to sign an agreement with the Siberian Spam smelters. The Spam smelters would recycle Red Army truck tires into Spam in return for lower wages and a pin-up of Michelle Pfeiffer. To sign the agreement, Mr. Yeltsin was presented with Siberia's only functioning ballpoint pen, which failed to function. Back in Moscow, President Gorbachev responded to Mr. Yeltsin's challenge by holding a press conference attended by the world's media. President Gorbachev said, "Why should a guy with as many pens as I've got worry about some schmuck who's only got one pen? And that doesn't even work. I got 5 pens here with tips of different thicknesses. And I got one at home which not only writes, but turns into a little torch so you can see what you're doing during the evening power cut. I got more pens than Yeltsin's had hot dinners, which is 6, and Miss Hivitova and I are just good friends." In London, there was a concert to raise cash for the Kurds. The glittering event was attended by some of Britain's most distinguished personalities and Jeffrey Archer. Hit act of the night came from Tom Jones, the unofficial ambassador for Britain, whose diplomatic skills had made people all over the world realize that the old British lion still had something in its leather trousers. Tom gave a live demonstration of his new aerobics routine for the over 60s. It was soon apparent that using Tom's system, even your grandfather would be equipped to pull a bird and take her out for a heavy night on the town, ending as late as 10:30 p.m. in a screaming ambulance. The Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh went to America to give General Norman Stormin' Norman Schwarzkopf an honorary knighthood. General Norman Stormin' Norman Schwarzkopf would now be known as General Sir Norman Sir Stormin' Norman Schwarzkopf. General Sir Norman Sir Stormin' Norman Schwarzkopf then demonstrated to the Queen the latest item of advanced US military technology. It was the collapsible, non-opaque, individually deployable anti-precipitation personal protection facility. The Queen said, "We call it an umbrella." The Queen and the Duke then attended a special session of Congress. The Duke took one look at the assembled legislators and headed for the bar. The climax of the royal visit to America was the Queen's attendance at a gospel service. As the infectious rhythms pulsed and throbbed, the Queen was visibly affected. In Britain, there was an incomprehensible move to put down pit bull terriers, a breed of dog whose mere appearance made Rottweilers surrender under white flags. Owners of pit bull terriers said that the dogs were perfectly safe. It was only people who were in danger. Properly exercised, the pit bull terrier has not yet been known to kill its owner, but there's always hope. The Prince and Princess of Wales were at Wembley for the FA Cup final. First, the Prince of Wales had a long and interesting chat with each player about trees. Then everyone settled down to the anticipated display of skills by Britain's outstanding soccer star, Paul Gazza Gascoigne. And they weren't disappointed. Gazza could have been distracted by the occasion, or the large crowd, or even the ball. But no, he kept his mind on the essential task of crippling the opposition. A few minutes later, Gazza's valuable right knee sustained terminal damage, during a sporting attempt to put another opposing player in a wheelchair. Admirers of Gaza said that it was just an ill-timed tackle. Ill-timed because a better time would have been February 1943 at the Battle of Stalingrad. Cricket, and Ian Botham, despite years of erratic behaviour, was once again called up to play for England in the match that mattered. The cricketing genius soon showed that his brain was in full working order. June, and Mrs. Thatcher resigned as a Member of Parliament in order to spend more time making final farewell appearances. The news that she would no longer be in the House of Commons drew tragic reactions from her colleagues. Mrs. Thatcher held a preliminary final farewell press conference in her back garden. She pointed out to reporters the various flower beds and borders in which Dennis had recently spent the night. The Chancellor of the Exchequer, Mr. Stormin Norman Lamont, had acquired a tenant in his basement, a Miss Whiplash, a trained physiotherapist whose main means of treatment was allegedly to suspend High Court judges upside down naked from the central light fitting and lash them with an MCC tie. Mr. Lamont was told he would have to meet Miss Whiplash in person to negotiate her withdrawal from his premises. He faced the prospect bravely.
We'll have to see what comes out of the negotiation.
The serious work of the government went ahead as usual. The Cabinet's new economic task force brought all its intellectual power to bear on the problems of the economy. Mr. Kenneth Clark led the team through the mathematics of how to double the annual supply of hospital beds. The next problem was, if a press tycoon has 8 private companies, each of which has 13 foreign subsidiaries, how many places can the newspaper pension fund disappear to while the National Westminster Bank is still trying to put 2 and 2 together? The man of the month was Boris Yeltsin. Visiting the United States, Mr. Yeltsin was accompanied by a personal advisor who was at his shoulder at all times, ready to tell him what he needed to know. The advisor said, the man talking is called Bush, and he's married to the woman you met earlier, the one who looks like a member of our piano-throwing squad. Don't forget you were sewn into that suit, so don't make any sudden moves or your trousers will explode. In Moscow, President Gorbachev was doing his best not to appear shaken by Yeltsin's challenge. In the daily vote to confirm himself in the leadership, Gorbachev took his wife's advice. He carefully voted 3 times for M. Gorbachev. Then he proved he had even more pens than people thought by giving one away. The shooting part of the Gulf War was over, but the victory parades raged on. The big victory parades were in Washington and, of course, in Baghdad. In London, the parade was rather smaller, owing to the continuing process of combining and reducing the regiments. The only remaining member of the Queen Mother's own dismounted punters had a ceremonial shouting match with the only remaining member of Princess Diana's own mounted regiment of rather dishy, mature men. Highlight of the London Victory Parade was another brilliant demonstration of the skills of British Forces Commander in the Gulf, General de la Billière. Seated behind Neil Kinnock, he efficiently diagnosed a rare case of dry scalp aggravated by shrinking principles. In Yorkshire, the wedding took place between the daughter of cricketer Freddie Truman and the son of film star Raquel Welch. Miss Welch passed unnoticed in the crowd, but several people wondered who sent the kissogram girl. And now, music. Once there was Kylie Minogue. Now there was Danny Minogue. Some people said they were almost the same, others said they were exactly the same. See if you can spot the difference as we bring them together for the first time.
Come on and dance with me.
And now, while the audience here at the Golden Ecu tucks into its Earth Maastricht avec pommes frites, it's time for another award. And here to tell us all about it is the princess of Parisian nightlife, Mademoiselle Alexandra Kazan. And which award is this, Alexandra?
Clive, this is the Napoleon Bonaparte Award for the most promising newcomer to world prominence in 1991.
Thank you, Alexandra. That's a beautiful thought.
Yes. And this is a replica of the beautiful award, a solid silver pen with which the winning newcomer can sign peace treaties, deportation orders, and death warrants.
Thank you, Alexandra. Alexandra, what do we do now?
I will now announce the finalists for the awards.
Thank you, Alexandra.
The second runner-up is Paddy Ashdown.
For possessing all the qualities of leadership except followers.
The first runner-up is Paul Gaza-Gascoigne.
For his amazing abilities to cause even more damage to himself than he did to the opposing players. Alexandra, open the envelope.
Clive, the winner of the Napoleon Bonaparte Award for proving that a tall, handsome man is more appealing than a short, fat, bald one, is... Boris Eltsine.
Boris Yeltsin is unable to be with us tonight because it's already New Year in Moscow and he's now celebrating in the traditional Russian manner, blind drunk watching American football on CNN. But this afternoon he accepted our award at a humble little ceremony in the Kremlin at which he publicly thanked the BBC for the solid silver pen.
Российской, советской, федеративной, социалистической при осуществлении полномочий Российской, советской, федеративной, социалистической республики.
More awards later, but for now, thank you, Alexandra Kazan. July, and the Group of 7 World Leaders Conference in London reached its climax with a formal dinner at Buckingham Palace. All the world leaders arrived with their radiant escorts. But no escort was more radiant than Dennis Thatcher, despite the fact that Mrs. Thatcher had not been invited, but had come anyway in order to make a final farewell appearance. The Queen graciously consented to a group photograph with all the world leaders, who managed to discreetly ignore the fact that Mrs. Thatcher was trying to get in through the window, but had been caught with one leg still outside by a squad of the SAS, who eventually bundled her into a scout car after losing 3 of their number to groin injuries. And so the conference came to an end, with the departing world leaders making themselves available to the press. Mr. Gorbachev was looking forward to going home. He had fond memories of Miss Hivatova. Mr. Major had scored a stunning triumph by staging the conference. He capped it now when he broke the world record for the number of times the rarely employed word luncheon can be used in one sentence.
The President and I had the opportunity of around 2 hours discussion before luncheon, further discussion through luncheon, and with a large number of people from business, commerce and industry attending luncheon as well. And after luncheon, we've had the opportunity of...
Then it was the turn of Mr. Gorbachev to say a few words.
Что нам нужно сделать уже в ближайшее время для того, чтобы реально последовал процесс, начало, который мы положили вчера в рамках.
Meanwhile, in Iraq, the triumphant Gulf War victor Saddam Hussein held a summit conference of his own at which he got together with himself for a frank exchange of views. Saddam's advisors applauded in advance because they knew that their own opinions coincided with his unless they wanted to spend the last 10 seconds of their lives falling out of a building. Saddam's main aim in calling the conference was to announce his new master plan for raising Iraq to the status of a world power.
ماذا حصل الآن؟ اللي حصل الآن هو باعترافهم أنهم سيبقوا قوات قبل العدوان وحشدت وأن هذه القوة لا تبقى في المياه.
The whole of Iraq got so excited about the visit of Tom Jones that when Colonel Gaddafi of Libya flew in for a routine bout of mutual mania with Saddam Hussein, he was mistaken at the airport for the Welsh superstar. As he stepped from the plane, he was mobbed by thousands of Iraqis crying, "When are you going to sing It's Not Unusual?" But Colonel Gaddafi was accustomed to hearing strange voices. He noticed nothing untoward as he was greeted by the permanent secretary of the Iraqi Tom Jones Appreciation Society. The singer's #1 fan led him off to the local TV studio where he interviewed him about his childhood in Wales and how it feels to be bombarded with women's knickers on stage in Las Vegas. Colonel Gaddafi did 3 concerts and a matinee at the Baghdad Polo Lounge before the mistake was realized. In Britain, the country was rocked by the news of a mass IRA jailbreak. But the most sensational escape was by Kenneth Baker, who, with one bound, remained Home Secretary. "I'm deeply concerned," he said. Gay activists threatened a campaign of outing. Many MPs were horrified, but Mr. Major was thrilled. He said he had been on an outing once to Skegness, with 3 kinds of sandwiches, 2 different coloured drinks, and balloons. Madonna made another breakthrough with her video In Bed with Madonna. Warren Beatty, who had been in bed with Madonna, said that if you pressed the fast-forward button, the video was just like the real thing. Australian cultural icon Kylie Minogue announced a raunchy new image, but pop pundits found it unconvincing. They said she was copying Madonna, which brings us to our next quiz question. Is this an unconvincing new image for Kylie Minogue, a convincing old image for Madonna, or a totally fresh departure for Tom Jones? From America came a sensational announcement that Elizabeth Taylor was about to wed her 7th husband. Then came an even more sensational announcement that she was about to wed her 8th husband. The prospective 7th husband realized that he was the 8th husband when it was discovered that Miss Taylor had married one of her previous husbands twice, or half-married 2 of her previous husbands once, or else filed for divorce in the state of Nevada before the marriage was finalized in a state of confusion, whichever was the more ill-advised. The Labour Party won the Walton by-election, thanks to a brilliant personal campaign by the Conservative spokesman, Mr. Geoffrey Archer, who was supporting the Conservative candidate, a Mr. Greenwood.
There will not be a Conservative victory in this seat. That's unrealistic. We have the best candidate. We have the best policies. And I'm sure we'll do better than all of you have been saying. But it would be a very foolish man who stood here and said we're going to win this seat.
Well, Mr. Greenwood's been saying that for the whole campaign.
He's quite right.
The Conservative candidate received a total of 3 votes and was last seen lurking in the grounds of Geoffrey Archer's house carrying a shotgun. The homeless of London received another blow when their cause was taken up by various show business celebrities who showed solidarity with the deprived by spending the night on the pavement. A spokesman for the homeless later said, "Just what we need, a bunch of pretentious actors taking our best cardboard boxes." Musical event of the month, and perhaps the year, was the underwater concert in London's Hyde Park, starring Luciano Pavarotti. dripping but hypnotized, the famous faces all stayed to the end. Even the busy minister in charge of finding a new name for the poll tax. August was the month for the Soviet Union's first ever democratic perestroika-style coup d'etat, designed to entertain rather than inform and carefully planned to fail within the week. While Gorby was away on holiday, the 7 coup leaders entertained the public. They were, from left to right, Dopov, Grumpov, Happyov, Dokov, Sneezov, Sleepov, and Bashvalov, who hid under the table. The leader of the 7 wacky dwarf coup leaders was Dokov, who gave a brilliantly entertaining speech on how to stage an unsuccessful wacky coup for your party.
Создание комитета и попытка комитета вывести страну из того кризисного положения, в котором она находится, поддерживаю. Я имел сегодня разговор с Борисом Николаевичем Ельциным. Мне известно заявление Бориса Николаевича, товарища Хасбулатова и товарища Силаева.
Several leading international political thinkers didn't realize that the coup was intended to fail. Among them was Rolling Stone Mick Jagger, who wrote a personal letter to Mr. Yeltsin. Jagger said that if Yeltsin was sent to Siberia, the Rolling Stones would come and sing to him to help him forget the hardship he was enduring. Yeltsin's stature was such that young aspiring politicians copied his every gesture, not always successfully. Mr. Gorbachev returned to Moscow from holiday. Though tired, he'd been no more severely treated than any other Aeroflot passenger. I'm sorry I missed the coup, he said, but I watched some of it on the BBC before Raisa switched over to LA Law. But there was tension between Gorbachev and Yeltsin. Yeltsin had received a letter from Mick Jagger, and Gorbachev hadn't. The issue came to a head at a meeting of the Presidium attended by both leaders. Gorbachev said it was all very fine to get a letter from Mick Jagger, but he himself had had a letter from Elvis Presley, postmarked Memphis, Tennessee. Mr. Yeltsin said that the letter from Elvis must be a forgery because he'd seen Elvis himself the previous day in a bread queue in Minsk. This was a blow to Gorbachev. He had lost stature. He returned quietly to his Kremlin office. There he was seen playing sadly with one solitary pen. During his absence, Yeltsin had taken all his other pens, including the one that worked. The big film of the month was Terminator 2. In Terminator 1, Arnold Schwarzenegger had been a bad cyborg. In Terminator 2, he was a good cyborg. But some of us think that there's good and bad in every cyborg. What do you think?
Go.
And that was the love scene. Artie went on to meet President Bush, which brings us to our next quiz question. One of these men can punch a hole in a wall with his bare hand, and the other has to ask his wife to do it. Which is which? General Norman Schwarzkopf retired from active duty to give himself more time for receiving medals. He was decorated with the rarely awarded Congressional Medal Wearers Medal for outstanding medal wearing in the face of an overwhelming barrage of incoming medals. The General expressed his gratitude in typically hard-bitten GI fighting talk.
I shall always love you.
Italy took delivery of its most precious import, Paul Gaza Gascoigne. Gaza impressed the Italians with his quiet dignity as he paid proper respect to the country which was ready to pay billions of lira for a man who can go through a nightclub like a boot through an opponent. Ex-Neighbours star Jason Donovan scored a huge hit this month in the revival of Andrew Lloyd Webber's Joseph in His Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat.
I closed my eyes, drew back the curtain to see for certain what I thought I knew.
Any fears of blasphemy were dispelled when many regular churchgoers in the audience experienced a feeling of religious awe, which they expressed by closing their eyes, gradually dropping their heads to their chests, and gently but rhythmically breathing in and out in an audible manner. And now, as the lucky people here at the Golden Ecu move on to Le Pudding Anglais à la Douglas Hurd au Custard, here to tell us about the next award is Mademoiselle Alexandra Kazan. Which award is this, Alexandra?
Clive, this is the Joan Collins Award for staying on the job, and it is awarded to the person who shows most persistence in a cause, even when it seems lost.
Thank you, Alexandra. That's a beautiful thought.
Yes. And this is a replica of the beautiful award, a box of 1 million used matches with which the winner can make a model of something when he's finally forced to retire.
Thank you, Alexandra. Alexandra, what do we do now?
Clive, I will now announce the finalists for the award.
Thank you, Alexandra.
The second runner-up is Mr. Kenneth Baker.
For refusing to resign as Home Secretary, even when there were so many escaped prisoners, they were creating a housing problem.
The first runner-up is the Chairman of British Rail, Sir Bob Reid.
For remaining at his station, even while millions of his fellow countrymen were remaining at theirs. Alexandra, open the envelope.
The winner of the 1991 Joan Collins Award for not shrinking from his office as President of the Soviet Union until the Soviet Union shrank to the size of his office is... Mikhail Gorbachev.
Mr. Gorbachev is unable to be with us tonight. He's working the night shift as the new delivery boy for the Moscow 24-hour fast food outlet, the Pitsov Express. But earlier today at the BBC headquarters in Moscow, he received our award from the head of the BBC Russia Bureau, Sir Marmaduke Marmalade.
Something special from us.
And I've just heard that we're going live by satellite to Moscow now, where Mr. Gorbachev has a special message for us about what retirement from his historic position will mean to him.
Но идя к этим законам, подготавливая их, обсуждая, мы и сами обогащали свои представления. И, ну что ж, просто можно сказать.
Thank you, Mikhail. More awards later. Until then, thank you, Alexandra Kazan. September, and Prime Minister John Major flew to Moscow to meet Boris Yeltsin, which brings us to our next quiz question. Both these leaders face overwhelming economic problems, but one of them has to cope with Norman Lamont as well. Which one? John Major then flew to Peking to tell the Chinese leaders that unless they respected the human rights of the people of Hong Kong, Britain would be obliged to send in a powerful note of protest. Mr. Major was assured by Premier Li Peng that the Chinese government would treat the people of Hong Kong as fairly as any other unarmed Chinese citizens. The two leaders sat down to a meal which Mr. Major described afterwards as very tasty, especially the two thin bits of wood. By pure coincidence, Mrs. Thatcher headed east at the same time as Mr. Major to make a final farewell appearance. She popped up in Tokyo before Prime Minister Kaifu could hide. Who would have thought, she said tactfully, that tiny people like you could have sunk the American Pacific Fleet? Television and Thunderbirds came back.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thunderbirds are go.
At first, the sight of the M25 with a car actually moving on it made the series seem dated. But viewers soon realized that it was a modern story about Mrs. Thatcher traveling fast to get to wherever Mr. Major was going so she could make a speech before he got there.
We're closing in on him, milady.
Good, Parker. Wait till we get to a clear stretch of road. We don't want to create a scene.
Very good, milady.
In Russia, life was getting back to normal. Boris Yeltsin and his staff spent the day triumphantly writing thank you letters to Mick Jagger. But Boris Yeltsin's rival, Mikhail Gorbachev, was not to be outdone. He announced that he had now received 18 letters from Tom Jones. The KGB had authenticated the great singer's signature, even though all the letters were postmarked Tripoli, and some of them contained photographs of camels in provocative poses. In Britain, Mr. and Mrs. Major stepped out together to attend a gourmet evening in London. The shy Mrs. Major told her husband she was glad to go with him as long as she didn't have to eat either of the two things she couldn't stand, herrings and curry.
I think this bit of curried herring is very nice. Very nice curry. More herring than curry.
At the Liberal Democrats conference, Paddy Ashdown rallied his troops with a stunning impersonation of Kenneth Branagh as Henry V.
Individual freedom and expression, yes. Personal fulfillment, yes. 1,000 times yes.
And as if that wasn't enough excitement, Ashdown was then the star of a riotously successful Liberal Democrat karaoke night. Eventually they were overcome by a busload of policemen. Golf, and in the Ryder Cup, Europe met America. The Ryder Cup is famous for its friendly spirit, and when Bernard Langer faced the final putt at the last hole on which everything depended, he knew that millions of fair-minded fans like me wouldn't hold it against him if he missed. Prat. In British politics, Labour was still ahead in the polls. Informed commentators were asking the important and significant question, how closely would a Labour government follow the policies set out in the Labour manifesto?
It's a question of no importance with an answer of no significance.
Foreign Secretary and noted linguist Douglas Hurd further demonstrated his uncanny mastery of languages when he showed a probing American journalist that he could also talk fluent American.
Well, you're probing further than I'm going to go.
Prince Charles staged a concert to restore Salisbury Cathedral. Prince Charles and Princess Diana arrived anticipating a stunning evening of music and drama. But all their expectations were exceeded when Paddy Ashdown came on to give excerpts from his speech to the Liberal Democrats conference.
Once more unto the breach theatre! Once more! Or close the wall up with our English dead!
A tragedy that threatened to engulf almost all mankind was the fast-approaching Rugby Union World Cup. Nobody knew how to play the game, apart from a few underprivileged, obscure countries at the other end of the earth, populated mostly by sheep. Countries like Australia, New Zealand, and Wales. Huge stadiums were built, but they remained empty. Underprivileged rugby players from all over the world were threatened with the appalling prospect of coming to Europe and being totally ignored. Then the miracle happened. The miracle was the opera singer Kiri Takanawa, who came from the small New Zealand town of Kanawatakiri. In between operatic engagements, Kiri liked nothing better than a game of rugger. She'd willingly turn out for any team that asked her, even England. As a second row forward, what she lacked in weight she made up for with a brilliant upper register which left the opposition gasping. Kiri's enthusiasm for rugby union was contagious. Suddenly, millions of women everywhere were excited by the spectacle of groups of underprivileged men putting their arms around each other and sticking their heads between each other's legs. As Kiri went on top of the pops to sing an inspired hymn about rugby union.
Just to be the best I can sets the goal for every man. If I win, lose or draw, it's a victory for all. It's the world in union, the world as one, as we climb to reach our destiny. A new age has begun.
Afterwards, Kiri was created a dame and said her greatest ambition was to meet the international diplomat, philosopher and entertainer Tom Jones.
With the crazy hair and all of that. Oh, it's wonderful, that voice. I mean, it's just so liberated.
October was party conference season. The Labour Party were at Brighton, where Neil Kinnock rose above party politics to show that the state of the country's economy under the Tories caused him genuine concern. At the end of the conference, Neil and Glenys led the delegates in a number which answered the question of whether the Labour Party had got the point about recent developments in the Soviet Union. It was an inspiring moment for all retired MI5 officers living on KGB pensions. In sharp contrast to the chaotic Labour conference at Brighton, the chaotic Tory conference was at Blackpool. Mr. Major was well aware that the conference would be haunted by the spectre of unemployment, but he was not a man to be put off his stride.
I know times have been tough. Unemployment has risen. Many people have faced great difficulties. She deserved it.
Despite this, the second day of the conference was officially designated and set aside as the day of spontaneous ovation for Mrs. Thatcher.
I've received a message from Mrs. Thatcher, and she's asked us to continue.
So they did. Some of them are still there, being fed intravenously. Mr. Major restored himself to centre stage with a thrilling keynote speech.
Above all, inflation would drive our economy out of the future and back to the past. Remember,
the power of his eloquence had his audience on the edge of their seats.
People on fixed